Hi, thank you. So yes, so I work as an equine behaviourist and as an independent barefoot hoof trimmer. And sometimes those are two separate jobs, but rather more often they merge together and become one job because I end up working with a lot of horses who don't want me to touch their feet and I get to trim them. So that can be problematic, and it's all about working with the owner as an individual to find the best solution for the owner and for the horse as a package. Working with an individual is something that everybody says, so much so that it's become a bit of a cliche. And this is one of my favourite films. You might recognise it if you're a Monty Python fan. It's a scene from The Life of Brian, where the crowd chants as one, yes, we're all individuals. Very clearly not making any individual choice whatsoever. And I think sometimes we tend to behave like this a little bit as well, where we say we're treating everyone like an individual, but we kind of fall into the same old patterns of behaviour change that we've attempted to use many, many times before, and we kind of forget to focus on who this person really, really is. Then, of course, there's that one dissenter in the crowd who says, I'm not. And that's what we want to be like. It's not enough just to say the words. We actually want to be what we're trying to be rather than just saying stuff. So, how are we going to go about treating people as individuals? There are as many different methods. If we're going to treat people as individuals, there are as many methods as there are people or horses or both. All we need to do is turn up to a client with a few hundred methods up our sleeve, and when we know what the problem is, we just extract one and everything's fine. Except it's obviously not that easy. So, like Julie has just been talking about, I happened upon this book, Influence, by Cialdini, and I was very interested that he had a book which sort of identified 6 key principles of influence, and all geared toward, it was evidence-based, he made claims that it was complete, and it was how to get people to say yes. That sounded great, sounded just what we're after. I was slightly sceptical, thinking, well, is it really that good? Can you really claim to be all-encompassing? It was a 30-year-old book. It's been around for a while. I then found an interview with him online where he was claiming that it's still complete despite all the many more methods that have come along. He says that they still remain within this same framework of 6 key principles. So I thought, well, give or take a bit, I'm going to go with that for now. Julie's already identified the 6 different sort of principles. We start off with reciprocation. I took from his book a little bit more of a sense that the reciprocation comes about through a sense of obligation. His example of the Hare Krishnas who tend to give out a book. They suck you in with a hook, and then you feel a sense of obligation to then give them some money. So it's, what I didn't say is a lot of his methods, it is evidence-based, but it comes from research into car salesmen, insurance brokers, fundraisers, lots and lots of people who are clearly successful, but some of the methods you think, oh, is that really for me? I'm not quite sure. Commitment and consistency. We tend to we have a tendency to behave in the way that fits with our identity and vice versa. If I might take you back to the recent EU referendum, in the run-up to it, we were all a bit uncertain. We weren't quite sure which way to go. We wanted to research. We wanted to find out more information. We got to the point where we had to vote. We didn't necessarily have any more information by the next day, but all of a sudden we identified with the decisions we'd made, and we were angry about it, or we were delighted about it, and we felt really, really passionate about the outcome. Whichever way you fell. So I think our identity and our behaviours are very, very inextricably linked. Social proof, that's sort of slightly more obvious. If everyone's doing it, we're much more likely to go along with it. There's a bit of a crowd mentality to that one. Authority, the classic Milgram experiment, where they explored the reasons or the sort of the tendency for people to do some quite horrific things just because we were just following orders. Liking, we're more likely to comply if we like the person. And finally, scarcity, the sale for one day only, the last few tickets for Animal Welfare Conference, selling out. I'm sure Suzanne would never use that to trick you into buying a ticket. So we have lots of methods. But I did feel a little bit uneasy reading the book because I just felt as though a lot of it was successful, but didn't feel quite in keeping with the type of message that we're trying to promote. We want to be ethical. I don't want to trick clients into compliance. I want to feel as though they're choosing to work with me, not just sort of being tricked into it. And I think we owe that to our clients, and I think we owe it to our professional and personal integrity. So what to do? I thought, it reminded me of this quote that I read by Carl Rogers. He's the, sort of the father of person-centred counselling that Debbie mentioned. And in this quote, he's referring to Skinnerian behaviourism, but I feel as though it applies here too. I feel a deep concern that the developing behavioural sciences may be used to control the individual and to rob him of his personhood. I believe, however, that these sciences might be used to enhance a person. So I think, I'm not going to throw out influence yet. I think the principles are brilliant, but there are things I feel uneasy about. So let's see if we can change them a little bit so that they're more in keeping with the ethics that we want to promote. So I'm starting again. Reciprocation. Here I feel as though what can we give, not as a hook that creates a sense of obligation, but something that truly motivates the client or whoever we're working with. And loads of people have talked about this a lot, about providing what the community needs. The concept of intrinsic motivation was coined by Harry Harlow. He found that this mechanical puzzle up here, monkeys would play with this puzzle and solve it in the absence of any sort of reward. And in the world of Skinner and behaviourism, this couldn't happen. These monkeys were doing something which I know they shouldn't be able to do. So the whole concept of intrinsic motivation came about. There's something inside us which makes us behave even if we're not being given a reward or money or food or anything. There's loads of research on this. There are two books I think are brilliant that can really help. In my work, it's something that I really try to provide. The first thing I do when I talk to clients is sort of almost tell them the reasons why they shouldn't book me. And then if they insist, then I feel as though we've got all that out of the way. They really appreciate that honesty that I come out with to start with. I do give quite a fair bit of free initial advice. Through EBTA, we promote an awful lot of evidence-based material, which is we don't charge for. And I do that just as in my personal business as well. Not as a hook, not as a sense of obligation, but just to sort of, if it's good enough, they're going to want to come back to me. I don't charge extra for initial consultations when I go out to trim hooves. A lot of people do, even though that consultation takes a little bit longer. And I try really hard to get some rapid early progress. As a behaviourist, we very often want to work with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but we tend to focus on the horse's hierarchy of needs. And I think we need to look much more at the hierarchy of needs that the owner has and try to find that key little bit of progress that might not be necessarily to the benefit of the horse particularly, but if it's this way of sucking the owner in so that we can make more progress later on, then brilliant. The commitment to consistency, we don't want to exploit this tendency for us to behave in a way that works along with our identity. My example of this, I think, is quite handy just to sort of look at my own personal experience. About 14, 15 years ago, when I was starting to see myself and identify with myself as an ethical horse trainer, I thought that the way I wanted to do this was to do lots of clicker training, lots of working with my horse with positive reinforcement. Not such a bad thing to do. My identity as an ethical horse trainer was kind of hinged on this idea. If you'd come along and told me that that was overtraining, that was a bit control freakery, why would you want to do that? I'd have said, but it's positive, it's all lovely, I know the horse is choosing to do it, it's all great. I'd have resisted quite strongly. As time went on, I found lots of other ways of supporting my identity as an ethical horse trainer. I found ethology, I found promoting choice, I found enrichment, and I found lots and lots of peer support. And now, if you kick out my idea of retraining dressage or clicker training, I'd say, well, that's a stupid idea anyway. So I feel very secure in my identity as an ethical horse trainer without the need to cling on to sort of old behaviours. Social proof, I think we don't want to follow the crowd, but I think people do need support networks that don't create a sense of sort of over-dependency. Facebook, I know it's brilliant in many ways. It has lots of problems as well. EBTA has a question and answer group where people can just sort of ask behaviourist questions, no obligation, no charge. It helps to create the sense that there is support out there. The Thinking Horsemanship Forum was something I set up when I was doing my sort of learning myself. Again, it was just a support network to make sure that people who wanted to follow this sort of very niche way of looking after horses could do so. EBTA is organising pub nights, and we organise workshops where, again, it's not just about turning up, listening to the stuff and then going home again. It's actually being able to create a sense of community for the people who are doing it, because they are very sort of isolated often because you're on a livery yard with lots of people who are doing all sorts of abusive things to their horses. And we're trying to do something different. Back to authority. I think there's a real different... I think authority can work. But I think, do we really want blind obedience and compliance from our clients? And I think there's a real difficulty. We kind of want them to do what we say, but if it's just blind compliance, then what's going to happen when they meet somebody else who's a bit louder, a bit noisier, a bit more persuasive? They're just going to have that same blind compliance with that person too, and then they're going to go off in a complete different direction. So I much prefer to promote a sense of autonomy. Again, this is a huge subject. The same book I mentioned earlier has a lot about intrinsic motivation, also talks a lot about autonomy. Ed Deci, the author, identifies 3 fundamental needs, where you're giving your client autonomy, but you're doing it in the context of enabling them to be competent, and also in the context of relating to other people and having respecting other people's autonomy as well. So as a package, then people develop the sort of the core strength to be able to actually use that autonomy and not just be left floundering. And I think the question here is not how do we motivate someone to do something, but how can we create the environment within which people will motivate themselves, which is kind of all linked to the make them think they had the idea in the first place, but it's just a sort of slightly nicer way of saying it. The liking. Again, it can be a little bit sort of false sometimes if we try to just sort of be a faux nice person. And I think we want to really build a proper relationship with the people that we work with. I really like the work of Carl Rogers. I'm not a professional counsellor, but it's something I've become very interested and passionate about just through reading it around the subject myself. And I know 3 of the key sort of ways in which we can support a healthy sort of therapeutic relationship is empathy, which Reese talked a lot about. We can see the other person in an unconditionally positive light, and we need to be fully congruent so that our feelings genuinely match our words and behaviours. This can be really hard. This isn't just a tick box exercise. This is about real personal growth, development. We need to really think about who we are and not just go in as the expert. We need to think about how we're in a constant state of change and improvement ourselves. And I really like this quote. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. And I think as therapists, as behaviourists, as people who work, and that's what we need to see ourselves as. We do need to change. We need to be sort of able to sort of accept ourselves so that we can accept our clients. And finally, scarcity. I think, how can we don't really want to artificially restrict the resources that we're providing clients with just because we're trying to make them more desirable. And I think, what can we provide that's very, very scarce? And I think to be the best that we can be, to make sure the information that we provide is top quality, I don't think you get sort of scarcer, if that's a word, scarcer than that. So I think that the more we can improve ourselves, the more we can improve the information that we provide, we're going to make ourselves desirable just by being good. I really like Dan Pink's books. This is just one of them. There are a few others as well. And he gives a sort of a whole chapter on how to be. If we're going to work with people's behaviour, how do we need to be in ourselves? There's a lot of overlap here between some of Carl Rogers' works, but this is more from a sort of a business perspective. And there's an ABC to how we need to be. Attunement, where there's a lot of perspective taking, sort of very similar to empathy. We need to really get inside the head of the client, understand the relationships and experience, and be what he calls an ambivert, which is kind of halfway between an extrovert and introvert. So we're not going to be annoyingly loud, we're not going to be sort of too annoyingly retiring, but just that sort of middle ground where we can be most effective. We need to be buoyant. We need to stay positive, but and accept that bad experiences will happen, but they're going to be temporary. Everything's a phase that we can move on from. We need to keep bad experiences specific and external. It's not just everything's terrible. It's sort of, that went wrong, but we're going to fix it. And it's okay to be negative. We don't want to be fake positive. It's not sort of Pollyanna mentality. We just sort of, we're allowed to be negative sometimes, but again, it's about moving forward. And clarity. We need to identify the right problems. We need to, the right number of options, the right experiences, the right labels, the right amount of negative information for balance, the future potential, and what to do is what to think. So there are so many different things we need to build into this. I don't want to say too much about it because I haven't got time to do it justice. But I think we need to think about who we are if we're going to do this sort of work. And so that brings us back to 6 key principles of ethical change, which is, I've sort of tweaked the title a little bit. It's not about how to get people to say yes, it's how to get people to want to say yes, and I think that's a crucial difference. So as a sort of take-home message, I'm just going to leave the sort of the tweaked versions of the 6 key principles of influence, which I hope will, although I haven't said very much about each one, because each one is a talk in itself, I hope as a framework it might be useful to some of you. So, thank you.